Welcome, podcast family, to Regulation Revolution. Amy Reamer, myself, Barry Vassar, we're here. This is a small snippet for you. We're calling it Story Time with Amy and Barry. Amy, tell us a story.
Yeah. So, um, I wanted to share just as an example for folks and also to help people understand that Barry and Amy are not trying to say that we have some of these perfect nervous systems that handle everything so beautifully all the time and our tigers never come out or whatever like that, because that's not true. So I'll share my little story. So my husband and I like cruises. I actually used to be a travel agent specialized in cruises. So we've been on a lot of cruises, and um we went on a cruise this past December. And we went to New Orleans for a couple days, and then we went on a 5 night cruise out of New Orleans to the Caribbean. And we went to go on a snorkeling trip. And I'm not a big, huge water person. And like I like to my feet to be able to touch the ground. I freak out if I can't touch the ground. But I have snorkeled before if I have flippers or I have on a vest or whatever, and I'm okay there. And so we're on this big catamaran, and they tell us that there's this area we have to swim over to do the snorkeling away from the boat, right? Because it's not safe for people to be right there by the boat. And the catamaran, you go underneath of like the boat is where they like drop you off into the water. And so and they had given us the like floaty vest things, but they didn't give us flippers, and I like the flippers. Um, but they gave us these floaty vest things, so I'm not going to drown. You got this vest thing on, like a little kid with their little arm floaties, right? Like I got my floaty on. So I get off the ship, get off the boat, the catamaran, not the big ship, and I start to like kick and whatever I'm doing to try to get over there since I don't know how to swim, over to where the people are. And my husband had already gone. He was ahead of me. And I felt like I was not moving. I was like, I am not getting anywhere. Um, and I was wearing out. And so panic started to set in. So here's the tiger is starting to wake up. So this is what the tiger is telling me. It's dangerous to stay by the boat. You're not getting away from the boat. You need to get over there to the people. They looked so far away. And so I'm like, I can't get there. And then my head went to, if I can't get over there, how am I going to get back to the boat? Like I'm good, like almost like, again, not rational thought, because I'm in a group of, 80 people, and there's a crew of probably like 10 guys, and all of this. And so, but my brain is going through these like worst case scenarios, right? That land of what ifs. My head went there. Well, I start to hyperventilate. I start to panic. And I'm like flailing around. Even with the floaty thing on, you like sink down, in the floaty thing. So you're like down here with the thing around your neck, which is a trigger for me. Like I don't even like turtlenecks. I don't know what it is, but I just don't like anything around my neck. So that's like freaking me out. I can't see my husband anymore. I don't know where he went. But I did remember. So the owl was present enough that I remember what they taught us, that if you were having trouble or you were having a problem, to wave your hands like this was their signal that you were having a problem. So I start waving my hands like crazy, and nobody is noticing that I'm waving my hands. So I'm like freaking out. I'm hyperventilating. Well, one of the other guests, a woman, saw me waving my hands. And so she comes over and starts talking to me. And so I started to calm down a little bit. So there's that co-regulation, right? Like this person noticed, and she got the attention of the crew. And so then they came over and they had a little floaty thing and they start pulling me. And then my husband noticed that, I'm about to die. And so he comes over and he's like, I just asked you if you were okay. And you said yes. But when I heard his voice, he was behind me. When I heard his voice, and here's co-regulation, right? With our people who are our safe people. As soon as I heard his voice, I started to relax and the panic started to go away. These people, pulled me back to the boat. And then of course, afterwards, then the embarrassment tiger shows up, right? Like I'm embarrassed, like here I am, this grown woman, and I'm freaking out with a floaty on, surrounded by, a bunch of people, like probably like 50 feet from the shore. Like, like at worst case scenario, I probably could have floated my way over to the shore. So this is how powerful, though, like our thoughts are in driving our fears and waking that tiger up and kicking us into irrational, thoughts and fears. And so, I wanted to share that because I wanted people to recognize, like, just because Amy and Barry talk about regulation, it doesn't mean we have these perfectly attuned systems that work well all the time. And so, that to me, I thought that story was a really good example of sort of how we kick our own regulation out because of what we're thinking of and the fears and the things that get caught up in our head, even if it's not rational. But then also how, and I couldn't even tell you what that woman looked like because I was so freaked out. I just knew it was a female voice and that was all I knew. And then, when I heard my husband's voice, that was calming enough to be like, okay, like he's not going to let anything happen to me. I'll be okay. And it was I've been snorkeling a bunch. And so it was just embarrassing, like like your nervous system to get so worked up. And now hindsight of this story, at the end of that cruise, so this was probably like day 2 or 3. Well, on day 5, I got sick. I had caught the flu and came home with the flu. And so I'm guessing also that my body was probably strained because I had this flu in my system and didn't even know it yet, which was part of, I think, which was tiring me out. Whereas I'm trying to kick and paddle and I'm like worn out and can't breathe. And so I think that was part of it too, is I was getting sick and didn't even know I was getting sick. So there's that physical aspect that was making my body not really probably be in good shape for going, and I'm not in that great shape to begin with, but in great shape to go like snorkeling when you've got your immune system's probably fighting off something. And a lot of times we don't know that, right? Because you don't show up symptoms until a couple of days later. So it made more sense to me in some ways, like why my body went sideways on that snorkeling trip.
It's interesting how our thoughts and feelings combined, how they impact our actions and how we can reframe things, or how we can. A recent experience I had, I've always struggled with heights. Love roller coasters, been in helicopters, been on airplanes, no problems whatsoever. If you send me up a ladder on a roof, you can't get me down. It's something about turning around and backing down the ladder. I can't do it. So I've always said like this fear of heights. And I recently did something. I was with my kids. We went to one of those bouncy places and rope climbing places. And there was this 30-foot rope wall, like you'd see military people climbing over and everything else. And my kids were convinced that I was not going to do it because they all know Dad is afraid of heights. And I said, no, I'll do it. And I got on it and I climbed up all 30 feet and got to the top. It was exhilarating. And then I climbed all 30 feet back down. And I started, I could feel the adrenaline. I could feel, the fear. But I started this phrase. I've been using it now for a while, ever since that experience. And that is, I can either let fear stop me from doing something I want to do, or I can use it as fuel to help me accomplish something I want to do. So in this instance, the fear of falling, it's not a fear of heights, it's a fear of falling, made me hold tighter.
It's the fear of landing.
Right. It's a fear of landing. But that same adrenaline or that same fear is what made me hold tighter as I climbed. It made me climb faster to the top. It made me climb more cautious to the bottom. So even though I could feel the dysregulation and I could feel it in my nervous system, I was able to channel my tiger in this instance and say, okay, it made me stronger. It made me hold tighter. It made me climb faster. It made me more cautious. And I think sometimes when we're talking about our tiger and our owl and our hippo, um, I know I have done it. I sort of villainize the tiger sometimes, but I also want people to know that it is, and we've hit on this before a little bit, that it's part of our nervous system, and it's there to protect us.
Mm-hmm.
It's there to
Yeah.
help us.
Yeah.
So you either let the fear of snakes prevent you from walking in the woods, or the fear of snakes makes you more cautious while you're walking in the woods. So you don't have to go to one extreme or the other necessarily.
Yeah.
But and the owl has, and it's funny because the owl during my climbing experience was mostly somehow, I guess, had flown off because I was not logically telling myself this is something I should be doing. I wasn't doing a lot of self-talk. It was just grab, muscle, climb, pull, muscle.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there was another episode that we did recently that we were talking about this, about, the sympathetic state, the tiger state, that helps us to do things we need to get done, or enjoy things and play. And I love the way you framed it, like it's either a thrill or a threat, right? And so, like, climbing up that rope wall, your kids were like, "Oh, Dad's going to see that as a threat." He's not going to do
Mm-hmm.
that. But you
Mm-hmm.
were able to shift, maybe not all the way to the thrill side, but at least were able to keep the threat part down. And so, like, and then in my story, like, going snorkeling should have been like a fun and a thrill, but
Mm-hmm.
because of everything else going on, and then the thoughts that went crazy in my head, it went to a threat. And
Mm-hmm.
even though there really wasn't one. And so, which is where, when you look back at it, we can get embarrassed, sort of like, by when we go into that threat space, or we freak out about something that really didn't really need to be freaked out about.
Mm-hmm.
But it happens, you know,
Oh,
and it just, we're human, and that's what happens sometimes.
well, it's interesting in those three parts of the brain. I know there's many parts of the brain, but uh, I know we'll get into the hippo in another episode, and we're going to get into the owl more. But just studying this more and recognizing how they all function together, like with the hippocampus piece, stamping the memories and such. That's all this is. Like for me and the fear of heights, I used to love riding the little tram up through the sky at the amusement park and everything else. And I can remember when it happened. I was on a Ferris wheel. Uh, Ferris wheel
Mhm.
with my dad. And when it got stopped at the top, he decided to start rocking the car back and
Oh,
forth. And this was back in the day where it was just a bar. And I remember getting that sensation. I'm going to slip. I'm going to fall. I'm going to fall. And that was from early childhood. But
mhm.
that was stamped in my hippocampus. The old hippo there remembered that. And so when I get to that point where I feel that same feeling, like all of that muscle memory comes back up, the tiger comes out. Um, Logically, I should be able to climb up a ladder and get on a roof. I'm not worried about the roof collapsing, you know?
Yeah.
So there's no reason that I shouldn't, but all of that comes into play. Hippo says, wait a minute, remember, when we get up high, there's a chance we could fall. Tiger says, we ain't going to do it.
Yeah.
But,
And I feel like there's a lot there, and maybe we'll figure out a guest or somebody that can explain this more. But I feel like there's a lot in there where we either have confidence, like, in our body, or we don't.
mm-hmm,
Or we have confidence that we have the ability to do something. And I think that's what happened to me when I was snorkeling, because I was wore out and tired, and I was breathing heavy more than I
mm-hmm,
normally would be. Um, I lost confidence that I could keep myself afloat and alive and all of that, even though I had the floaty on. There was no reason for me to not have
yeah,
confidence. My body was struggling, and so it caused me to go into freak out. And so it's interesting. And like you said, like, if you're going up the rope ladder, if you're more focused on the falling than you are the climbing, then yeah, like, the fear is going to take over, but your body and your muscles were able to, like, focus on the climbing.
Mhm.
You know, and I am one that heights don't typically bother me unless it's one of my kids. And like,
Mhm.
and my husband loves like climbing all over rocks, and we're in the mountains, and not like the traditional rock climbing, but just like for fun, you know, scrambling
Right.
over top of rocks and things. And well, of course, when we would be out somewhere with the boys, then they would be doing the same thing with their dad. And, you know, and
Mhm.
sorry to say this, but like I wasn't as worried about him falling. But then when you have my little kid here, you know, like, and or if you're on like a high bridge, I remember we went to it was at Grandfather Mountain, I think, here in Virginia.
Mhm.
And they have like a rope suspension type bridge that goes across to
Mhm.
this overlook. And and so it's just yeah, I think there's
It's
something with that visual, like when you can see if you're on a helicopter or a roller coaster, you're maybe when you're you know you're tucked in tight, you know,
Mhm.
you're seat belted in. There's a different feeling to that than when you're sort of free floating out there and relying on your own legs and your own balance, and you know
right.
that kind of thing. And when you're relying on that, it's like whoo. um, you know, so I don't know, but you know, it would be interesting. Michael Allison is a professional tennis coach, and he does some speaking with the Polyvagal Institute. So it'll be interesting to
Mhm.
get somebody who's kind of been in you know, professional athlete, professional sports,
Mhm.
who deal with the body and the confidence of the body all the time. But anyway,
Uh,
so that was my freak out story for today.
there was our story time. This has been story time with Amy and Barry. I feel like there needs to be a little jingle there. Um, and to remind our podcast listeners, keep checking out Spotify, follow us on Facebook, all of the above. We got stuff scrolling across the bottom there. Always be looking for episodes to be coming out, and we'll have one on the owl out for you soon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Amy.
Bye.
Bye.